Okay, Molton here, back with another rapid game in the series. So this one, let's start with the move pawn to e4, pawn to c5. Okay, let's go for a main line with knight to f3, d6. Okay, we'll go for a main line this game. If knight takes d4, knight goes to c3. I can opt for a couple of different variations, like a Najdorf or g6. Okay, so he's playing a Najdorf. Which variation should we play against this? I'm going to go for this variation with the move queen to d3. So this one is not known that well, but I think it's a really good option. It definitely takes your opponent out of preparation. Yeah, usually they play the move pawn to e6 or pawn to e5. If pawn to e5, you can play knight to f5, and play gets quite tricky. After the move pawn to e6, probably with the queen on d3, we want to swing it across to g3 in a lot of positions. I'm just going to start out with the move bishop to e2, just to stop any knight h5. And then I'm thinking maybe a queen g3 move at some point might be useful. We want to also decide where we want to castle the king. So we can go king side or we can go queen side. So if we go queen g3, let's say he castles and we play the move bishop to h6. That could be a useful way to gain a tempo. So let's go for queen g3. Castles bishop to h6 attacking the pawn. And this would force him to play the move knight to e8. And we could perhaps use that tempo we gained somehow. Perhaps to castle the king to the queen side. Okay, instead he goes rook to g8. So that was not a move I was expecting. I think it might have been better just to castle anyway. It's very useful idea to know this retreat with the knight, where you can go knight to e8 in a lot of these Sicilian positions. So after the move rook to g8, I'm thinking we play the move bishop to e3 here just to develop our bishop, and I'm definitely leaning more towards queenside castles just because he's played rook g8 and the king's going to be stuck in the center. But I'm not completely ruling out kingside castles yet either. It could be a decent option. Yeah, so b5. So he wants to play b4 and then attack this pawn. Makes a lot of sense. So if we castle queenside here, we'll get hit by the move pawn to b4. Do we have any counter-attacking moves in this position that we can consider playing? Like, could we castle b4, play e5? Is that an option? Then he takes our knight, we take his knight. It doesn't look that great for us. Like, his position looks perfectly safe. So how do we meet this threat of pawn to b4? So next move he's playing bishop f7. So I want to be very careful of playing the move pawn to f3 here, because pawn to f3 is almost always going to be met by some bishop h4 tactic. So for example, with f3, I'm worried that he'll just take on e4 and then play bishop to h4. So I need to be very careful of that. So what other candidate moves do I have? a3 looks safe. It stops b4, but it seems very passive. And after bishop to b7, I don't really want to play f3 like I said, and I don't really want to bring my bishop to a square like d3. It seems passive and I'm moving the same piece twice. So I'm thinking bishop to f3 here is probably the correct move. After the move bishop to f3, at least I am putting pressure on this diagonal, and I'm threatening to push e5 as well. So if bishop f3, bishop to b7, I can go e5. So let's do that. This is probably the better option just because it sort of offers me some counterattacking opportunity compared to the other lines. So now after bishop b7, I'm thinking pawn to e5. If bishop takes on f3, then I can go queen takes f3, or I might even be able to go pawn takes f6. Might be even better move because I attack both bishops. But yeah, definitely that looks good for white. So I'm going to go pawn to e5. If pawn takes, we go bishop takes, attacking the rook, and I don't see any other options there for black. So let's go pawn to e5. Yeah, so now I think black is in a little bit of trouble. There are some variations where he can sacrifice the exchange, but I don't think he can do it in a favorable manner here. Because he can't take the bishop, as I said, because pawn takes, knight would attack both bishops. And pawn takes here looks tempting, but then like I have a lot of in-between moves as well. Like I could play maybe knight takes e6 is an option. So after pawn takes, knight takes e6 might be an option. But then here's queen c8. So yeah, maybe he has to go knight d5. But this one I wasn't particularly worried about because I get given this f5 square for my knight. So I can just take the knight, I think. And then after pawn takes, I could play like knight to f5, for example. And this looks very pleasant for white. After pawn takes, I could also push my pawn up to e6. Also looks very pleasant. Yeah, bishop takes. Do I play knight f5 straight away, or do I take the bishop and play knight f5? I mean, knight f5 straight away looks very tempting as well. If I go knight f5 straight away, he can't take it because I take the bishop and then the rook is hanging in a lot of variations. If I go knight f5, he takes my bishop. Can I take back? He plays pawn to d5 perhaps. So that could be annoying because he wants to close up the position. But yeah, after knight f5, bishop takes, I have other moves as well. I could like take here. So definitely knight f5 looks very strong, but I think it might be simpler just to take the bishop. And after pawn takes, e6 would guarantee that black maintains the weak pawn on d5. So I'm thinking, yeah, if I want to play this slowly, I can just go pawn to e6 and I should be better after just the capture, and I just move my knight back. Or I can try to go for something immediately. I mean, the king is forever stuck in the center, so I have a clear advantage because of this. Just a question of how do we continue the attack? Or do we just castle here? Castle looks quite good as well. Okay. So e6 or knight f5 or castles. Well, okay, so if knight to f5, probably black will take. I take back, and maybe he goes knight c6 and then develops a piece. So not sure if I want to do that. I don't want the knight to really come to the c6 square. So I'm more leaning towards castles or pawn to e6 now. If pawn to e6, pawn takes, knight takes, the queen will move somewhere. I probably have to move the knight back to the d4 square. So I think we just get the king to safety here. It's probably the easiest solution. It's just castle. We'll decide what to do later with the pawn. Just keep this tension. If bishop to h4, probably I just play queen f4. It should be fine. But yeah, this f5 square is going to be a really strong square for our knight, and you definitely want to be looking for this f5 square in a lot of your games, especially if you play Sicilians. You want to go for this f5 square quite often. So yeah, black is in sort of at the tough spot here to try and defend. Maybe now e6 might be stronger because he's already moved the queen, so then he's going to lose an extra tempo moving the queen again. So I'm definitely considering e6 more now. I also have the move bishop to f4. So what do I want to do? I want to open up the e-file. So my goal is to open up the e-file here. Opening up the e-file would give me an attack. So maybe e6 is incorrect. Maybe I go for bishop f4 instead. This might be better. After bishop f4 takes, I take back with the bishop. I bring my rook across to e1, and this looks very, very strong. If g5 there, I just take on d6. So yeah, let's go bishop to f4. So we want to take on d6, open up the center, bring the rook to e1. Yeah, it's very hard to defend here as black. I'm not sure what black plays, because anything he plays, he's going to end up opening the position for white's pieces. Okay, do we take? Okay, we definitely don't want to take this pawn. We're not interested in that. But do we have any interesting wins here? So if we take the knight, he just takes back, and we don't think we've achieved much there. Okay, so the obvious move is rook to e1, and then he's probably going to play knight to c6. And then maybe I just play bishop to d6, or bishop to f6 is even possible in that position. Bishop f6 looks very, very cute move. Yeah, I think we go rook e1 first, just to put pressure on this e-file. But what's the win after knight c6? There should be something there. Maybe even bishop to c7 might be a good option. So after knight to c6, bishop to c7, and after knight takes knight, we have rook takes bishop. So we're blocking the knight. We take the bishop. If king takes, do we have queen d6 check? But then the king just goes back to e8, and then rook check, the knight can block on e6. So yeah, it looks good, but it's not quite enough there. Bishop c7 doesn't quite work. So instead of bishop c7, maybe we go back to our original plans of just playing bishop to d6. After bishop d6, we're threatening to take the knight and take the bishop. So there's probably a win here after knight c6, bishop to d6. And let's say he plays a move there to defend the bishop, so he could go rook to a7, then we could take the knight, and queen takes, then we could capture the bishop, and after rook takes we could play the move queen to b8, essentially winning the rook on the g8 square. So that would be a winning variation for us. And after bishop d6, if he doesn't play rook a7, then I'm not exactly sure what else he does to defend against knight takes c6 and taking the bishop. Maybe he goes king d7. So knight c6, bishop to d6, king to d7. Looks like there must be something there. I don't immediately see it, but it feels like there should be something there. Yeah, so knight c6. So bishop to d6, king to d7. What is the win? What if we take? King takes, we sacrifice our rook. The king takes back, we go queen to e5 check. Now if the king goes to f8 there, then queen d6 check, king e8, rook e1 check is winning. So with the king on e7, queen e5 check, the king can't go that way, so it has to go to one of these two squares. So if the king goes to d8, then what is the win? Queen to d6 check, has to go queen to d7, probably just knight c6 check, king goes to c8, knight e7 check. Is this clearly winning though? Because then he just goes back to d8. I'm not totally convinced that's completely winning. So after this, yeah, I'm not sure the variation after check king d8 there. Maybe after king d8, instead of playing queen d6 check, we just play slowly, play a move like knight to f5, and then we threaten the move rook takes pawn. And for example there, he probably has to go rook to a7 to stop that threat, and after rook to a7, I guess you just go takes, and then rook to d7, and then is there anything there? I mean, you can win the queen, I think. Queen e7 check, king c7, rook c5 check. That looks quite good. Just picking up the queen. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna go bishop to d6. I think the variation is winning after knight f5. So, okay, we'll go bishop to d6. He can't take our knight because we have in between check, by the way. Yeah, so this rook a7 move, I think we analyzed before. We said we just take, and yeah, we have a couple wins now. I think we just take and then queen check. We also have queen e3, which is also winning, I believe. So just double check it to make sure we didn't miss anything. But after takes, the rook is forced to take, queen check, king goes across. It might be even more accurate if we just check on a7 there and pick up the rook. So yeah, we'll just take. Yeah, so it should be completely winning now. Okay, so now we're just a piece up. It's the most accurate way to continue. Maybe just bishop d6, rook e7, rook c7. Yeah, so now rook c7. Yeah, so just bishop d7, e7, bishop c5 looks winning. Bishop check, rook e1 also looks winning. I think we just play rook e1. Okay. So yeah, this rook g8 move got black into a lot of trouble this particular game. Definitely should have just castled. So here, I think we just have checkmate after bishop f6. Yeah, so definitely this line is a really good option to play against the Najdorf. So let's just have a quick check through. Yeah, queen g3, rook g8, yeah, definitely just castle here would have been fine. Bishop h6, 98 is a typical defense. I can probably go h4 here, but the position is fine for black. Instead after this, yeah, so it's important to go bishop f3 here, I think. If we play slowly with moves like this, bishop to b7, castles. I mean, this might be okay. You can sacrifice the pawn, but I feel like taking advantage of the fact that black was underdeveloped was more accurate than allowing black to get some counterplay on the queen side. So I think bishop f3 was fine. Here e5 might have been interesting, allowing knight to f5 and going pawn to b4. But I feel that, again, with the rook on g8 and black's piece is underdeveloped, that should be fine for white, there should be a good advantage there. Instead, this one, yeah, this one, I think white is much better here. Bishop f4 is fine, and rook h e1, yeah, here. So just curious, just seeing if king d7, our calculation was correct after taking here. Knight f5 is also winning there, but we can just take, and after this, let's say king d8, they'll apparently just take on d5. Didn't even think about that one. Only looked at this and knight f5. Is knight f5 still winning? Yeah, it's still winning. But yeah, queen takes d5 is mate in 7. And yeah, otherwise the rest was fine. So I hope you enjoyed this game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.